All right, so welcome. My name is Lars Stranegård. I am the president of the Stockholm School of Economics, and I'm also the deputy chair of CEMS. And even though we are all under physical restrictions of many different kinds, this is an event that's really in the CEMS spirit. We have participants from all over the world, and we have a speaker with so much to say, not just about business and the automotive industry, but about the future of this planet. And obviously, the way we conduct business and the way we organize and live our lives will have an impact not only on ourselves, but also on the coming generations. So no business school and no higher education institution can disregard the challenges that all of us are facing. And the fact is that the level of complexity has really increased. Just imagine the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, that we, of course, need to work towards all at the same time. And the goals are obviously by no means contradictory, but they are very complex to deliver on since we have to do it all at the same time. So we need to provide decent work conditions, reduced inequalities, we need to secure peace and justice and strong institutions, and we need to see to full employment while consumption is responsible, secure infrastructure development, economic growth, and climate actions at the same time. So again, this is surely not undoable, but it requires an approach to the world that is fact-based, reflective, empathetic, culturally sensitive, creative, and responsible. So with increased complexity comes an increasing need for characteristics and competencies just like these. And CEMS has at its core the responsibility and accountability to society as a whole, to global citizenship, to cultural diversity, and to empathy. And as I see it, the best way to approach and handle the challenges we are facing are exactly these. And I think the automotive industry is an excellent example of where global challenges really converge. To be the CEO of one of the world's most significant companies surely requires competencies along the lines that I just sketched, exactly what CEMS stands for. So if you are to build an ultra-strong brand and selling millions of vehicles and exploring the very concept of connectivity, diving into automated driving and electrification and new business models altogether surely requires a very, very particular mindset. So that's why I'm so happy to welcome the Stockholm School of Economics and CEMS alum Ola Källenius. As you all know, he is the CEO of Daimler and Mercedes-Benz. And he will deliver a presentation on the future of the automotive industry and how a sustainable future can be shaped and, so to say, be manufactured. So after some 15 minutes or so, we're going to invite Martin Sköld to the floor to take part in a discussion with Ola. And Martin is an associate professor at SSE. He's specialized in the automotive industry. He is an innovation scholar at SSE's House of Innovation. And he has a deep, deep understanding of the automotive industry from the academic side. So Martin will focus on the importance of education. He will ask Ola for advice to students and other CEMSes. He will speak about leadership styles and of course on the current challenges and opportunities with the automotive industry. That's what we can expect from Ola. So I think this combination of experiences and perspectives with academic and practice is again exactly what CEMS should be all about. So right before we get started, I would just like to inform you that due to the number of participants, we have muted you, but do feel free to submit any questions that you have in the Q&A chat, because they serve as a great input to this and of course to future discussions as well. And also we will be recording the webinar, so it's going to be available afterwards. And we will send you the link to it after the webinar is over. But this is enough talking from me. I'm going to give the word now to the main attraction. So I'm going to do it exactly now. Over to you, Ola, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Lars, and thank you for having me this afternoon. It's great to be with you all in this web call and share some of our thoughts on what's going to happen in the automotive industry. How are we going to be the architects of the future of this business? And I'm also very much looking forward to a Q&A with you and see what's on your mind. I've called this driving towards a carbon neutral future, but I could just as well have called the presentation the disruption of the automotive industry. And what does that mean? If I think back to the founding fathers of our company, I'm working for the original startup in the auto industry with Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler inventing the car. It's only our startup is now, in the meantime, 135 years old. But some of the things that were true then are still true today. What is success built on? It's built on innovation and technology. But in the case of Mercedes, there is this dimension of emotion as well. So you blend emotion and intelligence. That's really what the three-pointed star stands for. But it's also always been about a promise of a better future. And as successful as this product has been, changing the world, giving us individual self-determined freedom, we are now in an era where we have to reinvent the original invention. And there are two main technological trends that is driving this. It is digitization, the increase of computing power that can be packaged in a very, very small space, together with artificial intelligence and all the software architectures that come with that. And it also is the quest to go net zero. We need to go as a planet, we know this, and I think this is maybe the defining challenge for society and for businesses in the next decades, is the decarbonization and the pledge to fulfill the Paris Climate Agreement. I'm going to start on the digitization side. This is a picture of an S-Class from the late 80s. So connectivity, you could argue, it's not a new thing. The engineers back then thought about this also and wanted to turn it into a rolling office. And within the limits of the technology back in the day, this is what innovation looked like. So the connected car per se is not something that have come around since, I don't know, since we invented since the iPhone was invented or whatever. This is something that has been on the minds of auto engineers for decades. But the great thing with innovation is that's what it can look like today. What you're looking at is the so-called hyperscreen that we're launching in our flagship EQS all battery electric vehicle. We're going to present this only in 4 weeks' time, and it's going to come into the market this summer. Here you have really a piece of technology art. 1.40 meter wide screen, bonded Gorilla Glass, curved, latest and greatest OLED, and technology behind this screen like you almost can't imagine, fully connected to everything else via the cloud. So things have moved on. The big winner is obviously the customer. And it's nothing less than a revolution that is going on in the auto industry now with access to this computing power and these new software architectures. When we talk about software, why is it so important? If you use the analogy of the car being a smartphone on wheels, if you have an iPhone, yes, it's a beautiful piece of hardware. But it's the software and the ecosystem that is behind it that kind of unlocks the full magic. You need to look at a car in the same way, where it's an entertainment center, it's an office, it's a driving machine. It gets you from A to B, in the case of Mercedes, from A to B in style. And if you approach this whole engineering challenge, the brain of the car is really the software. And we are deep into this, developing next generation of our user interfaces in the infotainment domain, developing autonomous drive functions, so-called ADAS software. But on the way to a zero-emission future, how you manage that battery, which almost replaces the combustion engine in terms of being the heart of the car, is equally important. And efficiency and energy management is the name of the game in that domain. If I pick on the middle one, autonomous drive, what's that all about? Mercedes is the original inventor of driving assistance systems. Little angels in the background that help you drive. And if you get into a situation which is tight, it's almost like the angels come in, take over, and rescue you from a situation that could perhaps lead to an accident. Now we're on the verge of actually stepping over a gigantic, I would say, border between where we have been before and where we are today. We are going to attempt with the S-Class that we just launched before Christmas this year to certify in Europe as the first production car ever to have a so-called level 3 system, where in some circumstances on the highway, when you're in a traffic jam or something, you can literally push a button and the car takes over and drives itself. It's not like our sophisticated driving assistance systems that we already have can't do that. They can do that. But when you leave the complete responsibility to the computer and the human is no more responsible, at least the lawyers that work for a company tend to get a little bit nervous. So you have to go to a whole other level in terms of redundancy to make that happen. And to even top that, for this car we have developed together with Bosch, big auto supplier that is also located here in Stuttgart, a so-called level 4 parking system. What's the difference between level 3 and level 4? Level 4 is in some parking garages where you combine the technology in the car with technology in the parking garage, you can step out of the car and the car drives without anybody in it and parks itself, like magic, in a safe manner. And I can think of that use case in the future as something that maybe even people think about as standard, that today would be spectacular. I mentioned the brain of the car. We are working on an operating system that we call the Mercedes-Benz operating system. And it is a holistic approach of a software stack that represents the brain of the car. That software stack talks to the cloud. So if you buy and own a Mercedes, like you have an iPhone, you have a Mercedes Me ID. Your profile is in the cloud. When you get into your car, the car knows who you are and stores some of your preferences in the cloud and can send it to any Mercedes in the future. In fact, I'm lucky working for a car company. I drive the new S-Class. It recognizes me, either my voice, the camera that watches the driver recognizes my face recognition, and I even have a fingerprint function in the car. So when I step in, everything in the car sets itself in the position that I like, temperature, seating position, what have you. If my wife steps into the car, they recognize her and say, "Hey, Sabina," and then seat moves, temperature goes up a little bit in the car, all of those different things. So the intelligence is key. The beautiful metal wrapping is equally important, but what is really the revolution right now is the computing power and the software. How do we do this? We are a company that is based in the south of Stuttgart, or in the south of Germany, in Stuttgart. But it is a global effort to develop new technology. So we have put up innovation hubs around the world, from Seattle in Washington to Beijing, via Bangalore, in Tel Aviv, everywhere. Companies like ours, they go where the talent is, and of course also try to attract the talent to where we are. It's both. But innovation is a global effort. For a global company, it's a global effort. It's not a German effort for the rest of the world. It's global for the world. One very prominent example of a cooperation, and this is maybe also kind of new in the car industry, big tech companies meet auto companies. Here's one example that we announced last summer. NVIDIA is a big chip designer in the US, very, very successful tech company. We're teaming up with these guys now to create the next generation products. It's not like it used to be you just bought some electronic components and you put them together in a car and you had, of course, nice functionality. Now you're co-inventing with tech companies. So Silicon Valley and Motor Valley, if you will, come together. For electric cars, my next chapter, what's one of the most obvious things? Am I going to have enough range to get to where I want to go? And where should I charge? Here again, intelligence, cloud, and edge computing. If you buy an electric Mercedes, you have access to more than 500,000 pubs around the world. I think we have the widest network of everybody. And it calculates the perfect route for you, especially if you want to take a longer trip, where you need to charge, where you can make a stop, and so on and so forth. How you should drive. If you use less energy for your air conditioning system, you get more kilometers. All of those things, all of this intelligence is in the car, and it's growing. That leads me to the second trend, decarbonization. 2 years ago, when we announced what we called Ambition 2039, this was really a clear strategic decision for the company to say, the Paris Agreement must be met. What can we do to solve this problem? Once you have realized and decided that if we don't tackle the CO2 issue in a serious way, then we're going to face significant risk. For business, in financial term, that's financial risk. So who's going to solve the problem? In the end, it comes down to technology. Who has the best engineers? Well, we have some of the best engineers in our company. So once you have gone through the phase of, let's say, waking up, creating the sense of urgency, somebody actually has got to sit down and solve this problem. And we have decided that we're going to be one of the companies that solve the problem. And thereby we made a commitment, by the latest 2039, we got to be carbon neutral in a holistic way, across all things, not just creating an electric car, the whole value chain. What does that mean? Our products are going to change. Today, we have a lineup which is dominantly based on combustion engines. In the future, we will have a lineup that is dominantly based on battery electric vehicles, and eventually only battery electric vehicles. Is this just a passenger car thing? No, it's not. It's going to happen in every form of transformation. Daimler is a company that sells from the tiniest two-seater Smart all the way up to an Actros 40-ton truck that drives 1,000 kilometers a day. Everything is going to go CO2 neutral. Some of the challenges are bigger than others. This case here, you see a 40-ton truck. Here, in this particular use case, where you want to go long distances with very heavy load, we're looking into fuel cell technologies, also a zero-emission technology, but essentially electric drive, but a different medium for the energy storage, in this case, hydrogen, green hydrogen. I mentioned that you have to take a holistic approach. It would be not enough if you say, okay, I'm going to make electric cars, the product is zero emission, and everybody else needs to deal with the other stuff. Won't cut it. You got to look upstream and you got to look downstream. So everything in the creation of this product needs to go CO2 neutral. That is why we have told our suppliers, if you want to do business with Mercedes in the future, and we're going to, walk with you on this exciting but also challenging path, you got to turn your production into CO2 neutral. We have made a commitment ourselves for Mercedes-Benz cars and vans that by the end of next year, in our plant, 30 plants around the world, we will operate in a CO2 neutral way. The picture that you're seeing here is our newest greenfield plant on a brownfield site outside of Stuttgart. We call it Factory 56. It is an ultra high-tech modern car assembly plant of the future. Some people talk about Industry 4.0 as the fully connected production system. This is this. It's paperless. Of course, it's CO2 neutral. We look at reducing the use of water. We look at reducing waste significantly. Of course, we want to improve productivity. And if you walk into this place, you could probably use it as an operating theater in a hospital. It's that clean. And that leads me to the conclusion of my speech. This is a challenge that is great, where we don't have every problem solved yet, but where we all need to come together, not only the auto industry, all industries, and solve this problem. As a small teaser for you, I mentioned this flagship electric sister car to the S-Class, the EQS. The world premiere of this vehicle is going to be April 15 in a digital world premiere. I know I'm ever so slightly biased, but it's got to be spectacular. So watch the show on April 15th, and I am looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Ola. That was a very exciting presentation. My first car was a Mercedes 200 SE. No, 230 SE, and I saved a lot of money to be able to buy that car. So I'm from a Mercedes family. I will start with a couple of questions about education. When I read your CV. You seem to have the most perfect CV I've ever seen. A master's degree from Stockholm School of Economics, from St. Gallen. You've been a trainee. You have been in multi-international organizations within the group. And you also been in many different areas within Daimler-Benz. In what way do you think education is important relative to personal drive and personality? If you talk a little bit from your own experiences and perspective.
If I think back before I started working at Daimler and my time at the Stockholm School of Economics, of course, I have great memories from that time, and also the CEMS program, which added another dimension with, in my case, I went to the University of St. Gallen. Did it prepare me for what would come next? I would say in general, yes. The whole thing of critical thinking, analyzing problems, and all those things that you learn in university, are they really relevant? I can say, yes, they are. Even if you don't know much when you start working and it's a little bit daunting and you get into this company and you don't know what you're supposed to do, you bring with you a set of tools that I think that I'm benefiting from still today. But I think it's also crucial, never stop learning. So once you're in your path, whatever path you take, you got to keep the curiosity from the university days and keep on adding to that tool set during your journey throughout your career.
Yeah, that's a great answer, a reflective one too, of course. But if we see education in the combination of having a great personality, what do you think about that? How important is education versus personality and personal drive?
I think there's no replacement for your inner drive and for the attitude that you have. So you can work on that. I mean, every sport you can practice. You can have talent, but you can also practice, and you can have talent and practice. So when we select management, or we select people that enter into the company, we look minimum, if not more, at what does this person bring? What's the attitude? What's the drive? What do they want to do? Do they want to invent the new world together with us? Those types of things. But of course, we also look at the academic record, and we select from great universities such as Stockholm School of Economics. So both counts. Once you're then on the journey, though, in a company, you cannot, a few years down the road, pull out your diploma and say, "Oh, look at my nice grades that I had back then." That's not gonna. That was kind of the ticket to get in, but you then have to earn your laurels as you move along in an organization.
Wonderful. We have a lot of questions sent in to us before this event, and I have also seen some of those questions being repeated in the Q&A and the chat functionality. So one of them, I think I can cover that. I guess we have a mutual friend, Martin Lundstedt, the CEO of Volvo Group. And once Mr. Lundstedt, he met with a bunch of trainees. And in this meeting, one of the trainees, he looked at Mr. Lundstedt and asked him, "What do I do to reach the top?" And Mr. Lundstedt, he was smiling a little bit. And then he said, "I will tell you a secret. You work like hell every day, every week, every month, and you do that for many, many years. Then you have a possibility to reach the top." What kind of advice do you have to students at this webinar today to be able to go as far as possible for them?
Well, that piece of advice from Martin, I think, is a good start.
Yeah.
If I add to that in a way, first of all, as an attitude, don't panic about your career, and career planning hardly ever works. It's much more chaotic than that, and circumstances lead to the path that you take. And in my now almost 29 years in the company, I think I've actually only ever made one conscious decision where I was looking for a position. Everything else just happened in it was timing, circumstances, and so on. But I think there's a ground rule, a basic rule, which ties into what Martin Lundstedt said. If you're giving a task, whatever that task is, try to produce a positive delta to the status quo where you took over the task. So you can demonstrate that you have added something, contributed something to the company that moves the company forward. And let's call that the work as hell bit.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. So it's a combination of having education, that's sort of a ticket, personality, drive, and then this data that we talk about. I will remember that. So thank you so much. If we just turn a little bit to another area, because leading really large and global organizations like yours, that must be associated with many kinds of opportunities and challenges too, I guess. So could you please elaborate a little bit on your leadership style?
It's always difficult to talk about that yourself. You should probably invite some people that work in my organization to talk about it. But I would say I'm extremely determined, and I've kept my curiosity. As I said in my speech, we're in disruption. If you're in disruption, just to try to use the pattern of the past, what got you here is not going to get you there. You got to keep your curiosity, your intellectual curiosity, to think about what could happen next. And then with determination, drive, intrinsic motivation, and try to get everybody come together. Working in a company is obviously a team sport. It's not playing tennis, it's playing football or something. It's a team sport. So if you could get people to come together towards that goal, those are leadership qualities that you have. But I think this curiosity, I saw a quote from Marcus Wallenberg, the famous Swedish industrialist, that said, moving from what is to what is about to come is the only tradition worth keeping. And I thought that was a very, very, very good statement. That is a spirit that you got to keep if you want to stay alive in business.
That's another beautiful statement. Thank you so much. Somebody, as a CEMS student, sent in a question, and that was, what does a normal day or a day look like in your calendar? What time do you go up? When do you go to sleep? What kind of activities is within an agenda of a person like you?
Well, a normal day, in a way, in terms of the routine, has been different in the last 12 months during the corona pandemic for every one of us, including for somebody who runs a company, compared to what it was before. So I spend a lot of time now in front of a screen. However, the topics are very diverse. If you work for a company where technology and innovation is the key thing to success, I spend time, as much time as I can, in discussions in and around the product, all the way from the design to the technology choices that we make for the product. You also have, if you're in a board of a company, a lot of the governance things, board meetings, supervisory board meetings, committees, all of that stuff. And yes, I have to admit, some of it is not as fun as it could be, but it is necessary things to run a large organization. Needless to say, got to keep an eye on the finances. So a fair amount of time is spent on looking at the financial performance of the company and what you need to do to safeguard or raise it. But there is another piece not to be underestimated, and I would say this session here is part of that, and it is communication. You are a communicator for your company, but also inside your company. And in fact, the meeting that I had just before this meeting was what I do as often as I can. I just select a group of people that are out there in the world working on something. Today I met with a group of brand managers and people I would never bump into normally in a 300,000 people company. And I spend an hour with them to discuss what their experience is, in this case about brand manager around Mercedes, and I give them an opportunity to speak to me and ask me questions. So communication in a leadership role is extremely important outside the company, but also inside the company.
Is that a little bit?
And the day is relatively long, but it shouldn't be a sport to see who can work the longest hour. You know, productivity is to get as much work as possible inside an hour, not add more hours to it. But it starts relatively early, and quite often it ends relatively late. But it's not hysterical, and usually the weekend, almost in every case, is largely free. Maybe you take some time to read stuff and so on, but we don't do meetings on weekends if we can avoid it.
That's wonderful to hear. So the possibility to meet with this group of brand managers, as you mentioned, is that due to Corona? Is that a positive effect because of Corona, or do you apply that kind of meetings except from Corona?
Pre-Corona, even though we had all the digital tools, mostly these types of meetings would all be in person. So most of them would be here in Germany when I'm here, but when I traveled, I would meet with people on location where I traveled to. Business leaders tend to travel a lot. I'm now asking myself in retrospect if all of those trips were really necessary. Probably not. It's not like I'm gonna stay kind of in my cave for the rest of my life once COVID is solved. But I am certainly not going to have the travel intensity that I had before. And I have to say, a part of this using the digital tools in a proper way, that you can meet with anybody around the world in a group of people anytime when you want, that is quite effective and productive, and that we will try to keep. I mean, we did it also before, but it's not as much, and that we will try to keep also post the COVID-19 pandemic.
I understand. What would you say is the biggest leadership challenges for yourself or for managers in general leading large organizations? You say it's a 300,000 size organization, and somebody is on the top, and you mentioned the importance of communication and so forth. From your point of view, what do you see as the biggest challenges to be at the top?
There's one thing, if you look inside the organization, in very large organizations, it is complexity. Complexity and the speed at which you get things done, and maybe alignment in and around messages and shared beliefs. So how do you keep agility in an organization that is that big, and keep the speed up, fight against new startups that are coming into your business, and so on and so forth? So you're constantly trying to work on that to get everybody on board, feel the spirit, understand, communicate where we're going, unleash the entrepreneurial power of the people in the company to push us in that direction. That is maybe the biggest challenge of a large organization. If I look externally, if you're in a business that is in transformation or disruption, now you cannot just do what you did before and do it a little bit better. You got to make gigantic choices and bets with uncertain outcomes, and you bet billions and billions of ultimately your shareholders' money on strategies where you want to deliver. And never has the uncertainty been greater in this business since the invention of the car, but it has also never been more exciting. So I'm in a way both blessed and cursed that I'm here now with the most exciting times, but perhaps the highest volatility.
See. Do you have any idols inspiring you for your type of leadership style from within the industry or any other industries or elsewhere?
I'm a huge sports fan. I don't have a wall of posters at home with my, let's say, favorite idols, but I watched one series last year that I thought was great, that described some of the things that you need to win as an organization. It was The Last Dance with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan in his final season at the Bulls. For those of you who remember that, his 6th championship. And to listen to Michael Jordan talking about what he demanded of himself and demanded of his teammates and how they made it come together, even though they know at the end of the journey, the team would be disbanded. I thought that was impressive. And even though he was, in that case, the superstar of his team, he never asked anybody else to do anything that he would be willing to ask of himself. So he treated everybody and measured everybody at the same high standard. I thought that was quite impressive.
That's beautiful. I have seen parts of that movie myself, so I understand exactly what you mean. You've been talking about digitalization, decarbonization, and so forth. And a lot of questions are also about the green shift, so to speak. And I think I counted to more than 20 questions where people are interested in hydrogen versus electric EV cars. What is your view on hydrogen versus batteries?
Looking at the technology developments and the market dynamics here and now, for passenger cars, it seems like the bet is going to be EVs. Energy density is increasing and getting better for the batteries. The cost through scaling and innovation is getting better. And putting a infrastructure in place that is available everywhere, as in charging points, and literally you need plugs to plug into your car, seems like something that is a task, as Herculean as the task is something that we can get done. Hydrogen as another form of storing energy is also interesting. In our case, we have both horses in the race, because we're using hydrogen for the applications where we need a massive amount of energy, where maybe the battery would be too big. I talked about this 40-ton truck. You would have to have a 7-ton battery to propel that maybe for 750 kilometers, whereas a fuel cell-based hydrogen solution is much more packageable. So it's going to be a race, but most of the money, and usually the financial markets decide this, it's a market economy where most of the investment money goes, most of the brains work on a problem, and that right now is happening on the battery side. So we are going battery for our passenger cars, battery for part of our commercial vehicles, and for the long haul, we got the fuel cell hydrogen in the race as well. Together with Volvo, by the way, we made a joint venture with them, even though they're our toughest competitor, and we'll do everything we can to beat them in the market. But in this case, two of the truck giants are joining hands to try to scale hydrogen technology for heavier trucks.
Is it problematic to handle the two scenarios in parallel? You have the traditional cars in one hand, and you have the future in the other hand. I think that BMW, they had a quote for that. They said, you have the evolutionary cars versus the revolutionary cars. And I can hear a similar way to reasoning from your point of view. So how is it to balance those two tracks in parallel? And you also mentioned about this 2030 aim that you are aiming for, or the goal, and the 2039 goal as well. Is it problematic to have both those two kinds of offerings at the time we're in right now?
To go through that transition as an incumbent company is very complex and requires a lot of thinking and a lot of work. In that sense, it's actually easier to be a startup. You can just do one thing, and you do the thing that you think is going to be the next. But you can't do that if you are an existing company. I mentioned this we're in 150 countries to 300,000. I mean, it would not be feasible to say, let's let 280,000 people go, and we'll keep 20,000 and we start a new company. That would create mayhem, and it's financially not possible. So you have to gradually go through this monumental industrial footprint change, but it's also a benefit to be an incumbent. Those combustion-based vehicles, high-tech combustion engines, also electrified already in our case, that is our cash-producing machine. We are our own venture capitalist. We are a profitable company, and we are paying ourselves with our cash flow for the future investments, billions and billions and billions. which means we don't have to rely on venture capital financing us, where they are betting the farm on you're either making it or you don't make it. So it has its advantages as well, but the task is very complex, it's very big.
So how do you convert an organization to the greener offerings? And I fully understand the situation of you can't let 280,000 employees just leave the company. How do you do that step by step, or is it possible to describe? I understand it's a huge question, of course, but if you just elaborate a little bit on it.
So it starts with a mindset shift. First of all, you have to decide where you're going, what the new path is. Now, if you're on the board level, I mean, I've decided. So for me, it's clear. Just because it's clear to me doesn't mean it's clear to every single person in the company. So the mindset shift that you have, you got to transport that in an enthusiastic, credible, forward-looking way into the whole company. And of course, you have people that will be doubters and say, you know, is this really going to happen? It's going to happen that fast. Maybe we should, you know, hold your horses here a little bit. All of those things. So that's maybe the mental piece is the most important thing, because after that, it's about execution. The most difficult part of execution is you need more people to produce combustion-based vehicles than electric-based vehicles. So the workforce is going to be smaller in 10, 15 years' time on that end of the company compared to today. You have to use demographics. You got to reduce staff in a socially responsible way. Gradually re-educate people, move them into other technological areas, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of negotiation with the union on this, needless to say. So that industrial footprint change is also a job profile change and a change for society, to be frank. That, I mean, in Germany, the car industry is the biggest industry, and the job profiles in the next decade are going to be different than this decade. So it will be a big shift for society, and something that you need to work carefully on and try to make it in as a socially responsible way as possible.
That's a beautiful way to see it, and I think you described your leadership style. I asked that question a couple of minutes ago, but I think that was a bit a glance of it. So thank you for that. We still have I think 2 or 3 minutes. If we look ahead a little bit, like to say 5-10 years from now, what kind of footprint would you like to leave behind you?
In terms of where the company is today, Mercedes is I call it emotion and intelligence, the promise of a better future, something that you aspire to. This is the brand. When you get your first Mercedes, and I hope you felt that when you bought yours, it's a little bit of feeling you kind of have arrived. You're part of something special. I want to, as a custodian for a period of time for this brand, try to leave it in better shape than when I got it. And that will require a significant change in the technological footprint of this company. So that's my main task. And on the side, not trivial, if we can make some money doing that, that wouldn't be bad, because in the end, the shareholders give us the capital that we work with.
That's beautiful. Is it okay to ask you from a personal point of view as well? Because that was the company kind of answer. When do you know when you have done a really, really good job? Is it possible to know that? And could that be a vision driving yourself a little bit, if you understand my question? So if we look at the situation 10 years ahead from now, what would you, as the CEO of such a company, would like to be known for, and what kind of footprint would you like to stand for?
Well, since we're both Swedish, we know that it's part of the Swedish culture that you should not try to make yourself stand out in the crowd, but to be one in the crowd. So I will have to let other people answer that question one day and not myself. Okay,
I understand. Thank you so much, Ola, for the elaborations you've done on those questions. We've heard about the importance of education, and you told us a little bit of that, what you look for when you hire new talents for the future. I tried to bring in a couple of questions from the audience, and I have had some own questions, of course. And we also talked about leading large and global organizations. I understand that must be a true challenge, and you've talked about the shift that you and your company would like to be known for in the future. So thank you so much. It would be wonderful to be able to go down and visit your company when the COVID situation is over. So I'd like to hand over to Lars.
Great. Thanks so much for this. Wonderful, Ola, and Martin, thanks so much. I can tell you that I have been following the Q&A or the questions being posed here in the chat, and there are so many questions that still need to be answered. Typically CEMSs who ask things like, how many years will diesel cars actually be around? Do we need to throw them all away in the near future? And also questions like the fact that Tesla actually has a market cap of 9 times or something like that. Why is that, in short? What's sort of behind all that? How would you explain it? And then also,
Go ahead.
And also, will Google and other tech companies come into the automotive industry much more? Or will you, Daimler Mercedes, become even more of a software company? Sort of, will you continue, or how much will you do in-house and how much will you do outsourcing of? And then questions like, will we own cars in the future? Or who is going to own them, basically? This is just a couple of, cherry picking from the types of questions that you will see in the chat. 1 minute answer.
Well, if I listen to those, my first answer is, you're asking the right questions. That's half the ticket to getting a job in our organization. Spotting what the right question is. So every one of those questions are things that we're talking about every day. There are more than 1 billion cars on the road. No, of course, the combustion engine is not going to abruptly disappear. And once we have switched to selling 100% electric cars, there will still be a lot of combustion cars running around on the roads. There will be coexistence for quite a while. But we also need to work on low carbon fuels. So blend-ins and things like that to lower the carbon footprint of the car park that we already have. Why is Tesla 700 billion and we are 70 billion? Why the hell is that? That is something that I think about a lot. Even if you would call that a little bit of a craze, the good news is, obviously, the financial market values what they consider the car industry of the future very highly. So if we can prove that we are the luxury tech company of choice of the future, not just of the past, I would like to grab some of that market cap cake on the way towards 2030. Google, tech companies, and things like that. It's a frenemy type of situation. We compete and we cooperate. I mean, there are rumors that Apple is going to go into the car business. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. They're very secretive. But one thing is for sure, just fighting against BMW and Porsche and Audi or whatever that have been the traditional competitors of ours, that's not the game anymore. There are some new players in the game, and we got to take them seriously as well, and we got to beat them, have more exciting technology. And this is maybe one thing that I would like to add for you guys as well. I know you're studying in business in different shapes or form, but anything and everything that you can add to your digital academic profile, it's worth its weight in gold, including computer science. I actually took some computer science courses back in the day at SSC, doing some programming back then. Computer science, software, digital. Don't forget that. Add that to your portfolio.
Great. Okay, Ola, thanks so much for these concluding remarks. And I really want to thank you. I think this is exactly, again, what CEMS is all about, having alumni who come back. And I urge you all CEMSs to do the same when we call for you, because CEMS is not just program, but it's really a network, and it's a community of interesting and great and excellent people trying to help each other out. So thanks so much. This has been so enlightening to us, and thanks for taking the time, and thank you everyone for participating, and thank you Martin also for taking the time and asking these questions.
Thank
My pleasure. Thank you so much.